Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and we are taking a look today at my predictions for the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs. Guys, of course, everything will go completely according to my plan, and I can read the future. I have a magic ball, and I can tell you exactly how many games each team's going to win in each series and who's going to win the Stanley Cup. Of course, that's the case, right? So we're going to go over my predictions for the first round, the second round, the conference finals, and ultimately who will win the Stanley Cup. Guys, I already did my NHL bracket challenge, so if you guys have not done that, make sure you do that before the games. By this time, the playoffs have probably already started. I'm doing it the Monday that the playoffs start, so I want to get this out for you guys, but make sure you've already done that. All right, so with that out of the way, you guys know my first round predictions already. So I'm kind of going to go through this pretty quickly. The Colorado Avalanche and the Nashville Predators. I have the Colorado Avalanche winning that series in 6 games. I think the Avalanche are just they just have more talent. Roman Josi will give them a chance in this year's playoffs. The other big question for the Predators is, too, David Rittich will start Game 1 for the Predators. So how long is their starting goalie, UC Saros, going to be out? He's potentially a Vezina finalist this season based off of just how good he's been for the Preds. But will he be healthy throughout this series, even if he gets a start in at least 1 or 2 games, hopefully? So that's going to be interesting. I'm going with the Avalanche, though, of course. A much more heated rivalry here. In this one, it's the St. Louis Blues and the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild have home ice advantage in this first round series against the 2019 Stanley Cup champions. But I'm going with the Blues here, winning this in 7 games. They have the experience. They have the team that's built for the playoffs, and I talk about that a lot, but I think the Blues just have the slight edge. I think these are 2 extremely good teams, but unfortunately, I think that it will come down to the Blues' defensive prowess, and let's be honest, the Minnesota Wild, for as much as they're known for their scoring prowess, the Blues very underratedly are scoring more goals than the Minnesota Wild are. So I'm going with the Blues here in this series. Now we're going more toward the Pacific side of things. The Calgary Flames and the Dallas Stars. I think this is one of the this is the quickest series I have, and I'm pretty respectable to teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs here, but I think the Calgary Flames are going to take care of business here against the Dallas Stars. I think the Flames will win this in 5 games. Really, this isn't a discredit to the Dallas Stars, but really it's a credit to what Daryl Sutter has done in Calgary. He's a perfect fit for that team at the perfect time. I think the Calgary Flames are due for a run this year, and I think it will prove to be a pretty good playoff run for them. That's a sneak peek into the rest of this video, but I do have Calgary winning that series in 5 games over the Dallas Stars. All right, so moving on into the second and third seeded teams in the Pacific Division. We have the Edmonton Oilers having home ice advantage over the Los Angeles Kings. I think this is honestly the best matchup that the Edmonton Oilers could have asked for. It's not Vegas. It's not Calgary. Okay, maybe they would have taken Dallas as well. But I think the LA Kings, a much younger team, one of the youngest teams in this year's Stanley Cup playoffs, against the Oilers, they don't have the most depth. They have some goaltending questions. But LA, as good as they are, and yes, Jonathan Quick is back in the playoffs. That is something to consider here. But I'm going with the Oilers. I think they have more superstar talent that's able to produce. I think guys like Dustin Brown, Andrei Kopitar, and Drew Doughty, they will have to lead the way. And I think they can do that. They've shown that they can do that in the past. But again, it's been almost a decade since they did that now. So it's going to be kind of a question of how much more attrition do they have in the league. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how things go for the Kings. But I think in terms of a matchup, this definitely favors the Oilers. I think they win that series in 6 games. Moving on to the Eastern Conference, the first matchup here, we're going with the President's Trophy winning Florida Panthers up against the Washington Capitals. The Capitals' goaltending has been very suspect here over the last couple of games. The Florida Panthers in the month of April went on a 13-game winning streak. That's pretty remarkable, and that's definitely boding well for them going into the postseason. Meanwhile, the complete opposite side, the Washington Capitals basically limping into the Stanley Cup playoffs, losing 5 of their past 6 games. They had a couple guys that were out with injury for a lot of the season, guys like Anthony Mantha, but when they did come back into the lineup, they did play quite well. So maybe being a little bit more, the fact that the team's a little healthier now, you have guys that are a little bit more well-rested, like Anthony Mantha, that could end up being a good thing for them. The other big, the big elephant in the room is Ovi. Is Ovechkin going to be available in this round? Because he would be a huge loss for the Washington Capitals if he were not available in the first round against the Panthers. I have the Panthers winning this in 6 games. I think it's the favorable matchup for them. So it's the battle of the blue and whites in the Atlantic Division. The hometown Toronto Maple Leafs, they have home ice advantage in their first round series against the team looking to three-peat and defend their title for their 3rd straight Stanley Cup, the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Toronto Maple Leafs are the younger team here with less experience. They have a lot more to lose, though, honestly, in this series. There's no excuses, and unfortunately, the Leafs are in a spot where no matter who you play against, you're going to have to play against good teams to win a Stanley Cup. And whether that's in the first round or the Stanley Cup final, doesn't really matter. They're going to have a big test here in the first round. Honestly, if the Leafs somehow get through this first round series, I think it's going to be similar to what happened to Montreal last year. They're just going to have that good mojo, lots of confidence. I could see, honestly, Toronto going all the way if they win this first round. But they have to get through the first round. And unfortunately, I don't think they'll be able to do that with all the pressure on this organization. I do think Tampa can go into Toronto in a Game 7 and beat the Maple Leafs in Scotiabank Arena for Game 7. I have Tampa moving on to the second round. That is definitely the most marquee series in this year's playoffs in the first round, without a doubt. Toronto versus Tampa. That is going to be a really, really good series. So now we're moving more into the Old Patrick division. The Carolina Hurricanes and the Boston Bruins. There's a little bit of a formal rivalry here, as the Carolina Hurricanes, who used to be the Hartford Whalers, they're, obviously rivals to Boston. They moved to Carolina. These two teams played each other in 2019. Carolina is much more playoff averse since they last met in the Eastern Conference Finals in 2019, when the Bruins ultimately lost in the finals to the Blues. But I think the Bruins have a lot more to lose in this series. This is a team that's very hungry. They've played really well in the second half of the season. Yeah, they struggled a little bit in the month of April, but that was really because of guys just resting at that point. They knew they were making the playoffs. Their goaltending's been very good. I assume it's going to be Linus Ullmark starting Game 1, but Jeremy Swayman has been very good in his own right as well. He might get the start as well. I do have the Bruins taking this series in 6 games. We already talked about that. I think the Bruins are due for a Cinderella run. I think this is their last shot, potentially Bergeron's last season there. They've lost a lot of guys. Yes, they've lost Krejci. They've lost Rask. They've lost Chara. But they've also had the emergence of some of their depth players, and I think that's really the testament to the Bruins organization, is some of the depth guys they brought in, and I think their goaltending is able to go, I really do believe Jeremy Swayman or Linus Ullmark, whoever's in, doesn't really matter. I think they could steal them a game or two in this series. A lot of it's going to come down to the situation with Carolina. Freddie Anderson doesn't look like he's going to start Game 1. That means Kochev, the young goalie, steps in there. That's a big task for him, considering he's only played a handful of games here during the end of the regular season. Will he be able to handle the pressures of the Stanley Cup playoffs? I do have Boston winning that series. And to wrap things up in the first round, the Pittsburgh Penguins are playing the New York Rangers. This is not an unfamiliar series. We see these teams play each other a lot in the mid-2010s, even in the 2000s. This is going to be a really good matchup. Obviously, the last time these two teams met, Shesterkin was in the head of the Penguins, waving them off the ice at Madison Square Garden. We'll see how that's kind of festered for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Are they going to use that as momentum, or are they going to let that be sort of a distraction for them in the playoffs? Sidney Crosby's had an incredible year, very under the radar. He did miss a lot of games because of injury, so nobody's really talking about Sid in the Hart conversation, but he's really, in terms of his point per game, he's probably better than even Connor McDavid. Like, he has been incredible. So that's something to consider as well. He's also looking for his 200th NHL point in the postseason. So he's going to be looking to get to be one of the only, he would be the sixth player in NHL history to record 200 points in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So he's 9 points away from that. We'll see how this first round goes for him and the Penguins. But I do have the Rangers winning this in 7 games. I do have the concern that there is a lot of young guys on the Rangers. How are they going to handle the bright lights in Pittsburgh and, of course, in Manhattan come playoff time? It's a different animal. The Penguins do still have Chris Letang. They have Malkin. They still have Crosby. But this, kind of like the Bruins, could be their last run. Gino and Letang, both on the final years of their contracts. The real question here, though, is can Tristan Jarry hold, or really Casey DeSmith, as Jarry is hurt, can Casey DeSmith battle up against Igor Shesterkin in between the pipes for the Rangers? I think that's the difference in this series, and I have the Rangers moving on to the second round in a 7-game series with the Penguins winning it in MSG. Now we move on to the second round. We're going to head back to the Western Conference, the Colorado Avalanche and the St. Louis Blues. I think both these teams are going to look pretty good going into this series. I could see Colorado maybe coming out a little slow in this series. The Blues may start off with a lot of momentum. They played a 7-game series, a hard-fought series against Minnesota. I think Colorado will kind of be nonchalantly coming into this second round series against the Blues. They might drop games 1 or 2 in Colorado and kind of fight their way back to win this series. I think the Avalanche just have the more skill to their team. But don't count out the Blues here. I think the Blues are going to make this a tough series. I think this will go 6 or 7 games. I think both these teams are extremely talented, and I think they're going to be in for really one of the best playoff series of the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2022. Now we're heading back toward the Pacific. Guys, with the way the first round matches up, the Battle of Alberta, we're going to have the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers. I think that's going to be an incredible series, a very hard-fought series. A lot of bad blood between these organizations, between Milan Lucic playing against the team he signed as a free agent back in 2015, 2016, 2017, somewhere in that range, right? So he's going to be playing his old team. You obviously have Tkachuk. You have Evander Kane on the Oilers. That could be a really, really good series. In a much different entertainment than the potential Avalanche Blues series, it's much more methodical and fundamentals. I think it's going to be a lot more chippy and aggressive in the Flames versus Oilers in the second round. But I do have the Flames winning that Battle of Alberta. I think they'll come out ahead in this one and end up going to the Western Conference Final. So with that said, let's go to the East. We have the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning rematching. Guys, honestly, I think this could be the series that Tampa drops it. They're going to have a really hard-fought series, and this is my respect to the Leafs. I think a really hard-fought series against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it may prove to be too much for them come the second round. I think Florida is going to slay the Dragon, and this could be the year for Florida, kind of similar to what we saw back in 2011 of the Vancouver Canucks. They went to the Western Conference Final. They played the Chicago Blackhawks, and I'll never forget that series. They slayed the Dragon. They won that series. They went to the Stanley Cup Finals and unfortunately lost it in 2011 to the Bruins. But I think Florida's due for that type of run. You won the President's Trophy. You go up against your biggest team that you just haven't been able to beat in the playoffs. I think they will do that this year. They will beat the Tampa Bay Lightning and go on to the Eastern Conference Finals to continue their unbelievable run. Now going toward the Northeast here, we have the Bruins and the Rangers in the second round. We are not unfamiliar to this. We've seen this in the 2010s before. This is a pretty good matchup. And honestly, I think this is going to come down to the experience. Goaltending toe for toe, I think Swayman or Ullmark could compete with Shesterkin. I think Shesterkin could steal more games in this series. But the depth of the Bruins, the experience of the Bruins, the veteran leadership, maybe Marchand poking at some of the younger guys on the Rangers, like Lafreniere, like Kakko, I think that could prove to be too much for the Rangers in this series. And as good as the goaltending's been for the Rangers, I do think the Bruins have a little bit more experience, enough veteran leadership. I think they get past the New York Rangers and go back to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 2019. Now that sets up for the Final Four. We have the Colorado Avalanche and the Calgary Flames in the Western Conference Final. Guys, this is the series we've been talking about all season. We're kind of preemptively waiting for this series as these are the two top teams in the Western Conference, really with no disregard to the other guys, but these are the top teams, right? When you look at the skill and the depth and the goaltending, this series is going to be tough. Two extremely